Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. This is Scott Piachetti from Geopath. And I just want to, first of all, thank everybody. Thanks so many of you for signing up and joining today's session. We're really excited about it. And if you joined last month, we had a session with a panel of media operators, just talking about how they've been navigating the past few months and looking to the future. And for this month, we wanted to do the same thing, but we wanted to hear from a panel of agency experts. And I'm really excited today with our panel. We have a great mix from across the country, from different size agencies, as well as different roles. So I'm really excited and really want to talk today about kind of what they're seeing, how they're navigating, as the title says, the current situation, but more importantly, looking beyond that, like looking to the future and what are we seeing and, how are we getting through all this together. My hope is that, everybody listening in today can take away something that will really help them in their day to day, and really find out a nice nugget of information. And so without further ado, let's get into it. And I just want to welcome our panel today, and everybody will join. Oop. There I am. Sorry, everybody. Hi. So first of all, thank you. Thank you again. And I wanted to start off by just giving everybody the opportunity to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about your organization, your role, your title, and then we'll go from there. And Monica, do you mind starting us off?
Sure. Good morning. Monica Denney. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Delta Media.
Great. And you're in Portland, right?
I'm in Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, Washington. And today is really my first day in like 5 months that I'm back in my office. I have the luxury of being here all alone, but I miss my team. But you don't have to listen to my dogs barking in the background this way.
Cool.
Which seems to be a daily occurrence.
Yes. Jill, how about you?
Hi. First, thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to have our conversation today, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Jill Rothenhauser. I am a group director at Rapport for our Midwest region. I'm based in Detroit, so I oversee our Detroit and Chicago teams.
Hi, everyone. Justin Symons here. I am a group media director at Project X, based in New York, but overseeing planning, investment, nationally across all our offices in New York, Denver, Nashville, and Los Angeles.
Great. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it. Just a couple housekeeping things before we do really get into the questions. If you're listening in and you do have a question, please feel free to ask it. Well, we're going to do our best to ask as many questions as we can. We'll probably hold those until a bit near the end of the discussion. But if you can really put those questions in the Q&A widget versus the chat, just makes it a little easier for us to manage and a better chance that we're not going to lose your question in the in the stream of the chat. So just want to say thank you for doing that. Also, there's a couple other people on the line who you may hear their voice, Brian Shopper and AJ Chaffee from Geopath. They're going to help us monitor the questions. So I may pause and be like, hey, Brian, any questions today? Any other questions? So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that and they don't wonder who this random voice is joining us. So, but just to, first, I think a question on everybody's mind today that's listening in is, right now, given where we are with, the COVID-19 recovery and just everything else going on, in the country and, the potential kind of reemergence of different markets, what is your sense, your collective sense of where clients are in terms of out-of-home advertising? Are they ready? What types of questions are they asking you all? Jill, do you want to kick us off with that?
Sure. I would describe it as them being cautiously optimistic. They're really craving the mobility and the traffic updates to help drive their decision making. And I think what they're trying to do is probably balance out that data with what they see in their own neighborhood and their own markets, or even the latest news story. And a lot of brands, I feel like they're ready to get back out there because out of home is a big part of their media mix, and they love to use it in some cases, whether it's promoting, you know, their next title or just a new brand launch. But they're still going to come to us for finding a solution for all of those things. So more and more, we're just adding additional rationale, more so than we ever have before, to continue to encourage them to use out of home. So advertisers, I feel like, kind of want to be reassured that even though this virus continues to be unpredictable, that their out of home campaign will remain flexible. So a lot of questions we're being asked is, you know, what happens if we're contracted and wave 2 hits? How are we preparing and negotiating up front with media owners to ensure impression delivery or favorable or flexible cancellation terms if they need to pause again, like we did in the spring? And I would say, you know, we learned a lot in the spring. I mean, we kind of went through and had a lot of hard conversations, but media partners were incredibly generous and flexible and really helped us work through those situations. So now I just feel like it's having to have those conversations up front and helping to set the expectations with the advertisers and making them feel more comfortable in putting out of home into their media mix. And as I mentioned, like, we're just getting a lot of questions about the traffic figures and trends. So more of that data and rationale is going into our recommendations.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would, go ahead. No, I would agree. You know, just with the cautious optimism, I think, is a big thing, and a lot of the focus around that cautious portion of it. And that's where, like Jill said, like, a lot of the questions come in. You know, they want more and more data around what, you know, what is going to make them feel comfortable. It's flexibility, it's mobility data, it's all those things that are going to make that cautious, you know, seem a little bit less. They'll be a little more on the optimistic side. I'm a little more ready to plan and get back into the market, you know, versus that trepidation that they feel.
Yeah, I agree. Not to be too redundant, I think in the spring, none of us were anticipating this, so we were reactive and trying to figure out what to do immediately. Now our clients are asking us to be more proactive. Again, to Jill's point, with those flexibility in terms, knowing going in what we can do if something happens to pause or move.
That's a great segue, Monica. So, you know, with the situation still fluid, you know, markets are opening, some are closing, some are reopening, et cetera. Like, how are you even able to plan for future campaigns? You know, how is that even going on right now?
Yeah, I think, I mean, honestly, before COVID, we were already working at a warp speed. Now we're working at like warp speed times 10. But we have shorter lead times, shorter planning windows. You know, at this point, I'm looking at my calendar, right? At this point in late July, in most years, we're looking at Q4 planning, maybe 2021. Right now, in some cases, we're looking at August, September. Clients are being, you know, planning in a much shorter lead time, at least with our client base. And there's a lot of questions. I mean, to our last point, there's a lot of uncertainty. They are cautiously optimistic, but there's a lot of uncertainty. So above and beyond just the impression and the mobility data, there, you know, it's what exactly is open in any given market. Like, if the bars or the beaches close and that rolls back, what does that mean to my campaign, right? So it's not just, it's more drilling down to the specifics in any individual market. So I think, at least for us, I'm seeing a much shorter lead time. We're working quick, but with a shorter window.
Have Jill and Justin, have you seen something similar going on? That's incredible. Like, it sounds like the lead times are so short right now.
Yeah, I think they were, you know, they were short before this, and this has just condensed them even further, to the point where, you know, people are so, you know, again, back to the cautious optimism, people are cautious about, you know, where they're making their investments, when they're ready to make investments. You know, a lot of people's, you know, budgets are even tighter now too. So they have to be smarter about when they're making their investments and where they are. And if there's any sorts of trepidation because of, a resurgence of COVID or something like that. They want to be very keen to those things. So planning campaigns out for 5-6 months is just not something that we're seeing right now, and not something that clients are comfortable with. It's, like Monica said, it's August right now. I mean, we're July 24th today, and people are looking at the first and second week of August, because it's just that narrowly targeted right now.
I think just to add to that, I think the advertisers are, kind of readjusting too, in terms of like understanding that they need to be flexible as well. And, they're constant, maybe they have a message and then they're like, oh, we need to flip this because something changed in that particular market, stages moved. And I think we're all learning to just be flexible and set expectations up front for everybody. And to, Justin and Monica's point, every market, we're at a different stage at this point. So we can't just like plan top 10 and be like, this is the same for everybody. Now, maybe with the plans, we're sending a market overview that speaks to that specific stage and what that market is going through right now. And maybe we're recommending this format just for this market because they're in this stage and it makes more sense. And we're going to pull out of transit in this one because they're still really shut down. So it's kind of really tweaking and moving things around, and also understanding how flexible the client is going to be with with their creative, and what makes sense for them, maybe leaning more towards digital so that they can do things more last minute and make those decisions based on what's happening in the market.
Right. That's a good point. So things are getting tighter, clients are needing to be, and everybody's, I think, sounds like is being more flexible. How has that impacted your strategies with clients over the past few months? Have your strategies ended up changing, or how you're working with your clients to create these plans changed in terms of the strategic planning portion of it?
Yeah, I mean, at least I know on our end, we've been trying to really tell everyone we can't assume our client strategy today is anything like it was 6 months ago, or really even anything like it was 30 days ago. You really need to be talking on a regular basis to find out where they're at from their business standpoint and their strategies from an overall media, let alone from an out-of-home specific.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, I would agree. This is just made such an impact on everyone's business. A very small portion positively, but a lot of it negatively. And there's people's company strategies, brand strategies have completely changed because of how it's affected their bottom line. And all sorts of other facets of the business. So I think everything's very, very fluid right now, and we're all just trying to optimize and plan to it.
And it came up, I think, a couple of times already, but I just want to dig a little deeper into it. What data points are you taking into account as you plan these days? Is it all just about data? Is there a qualitative and quantitative aspect to it? And just thinking a little bit more about that. And the mobility data came up, and like, how are you using this? All this kind of set of information to help these days. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think the mobility data has been great. I think whether it's GeoPass variation dashboard, it's Apple mobility data, it's some of the media owners' proprietary data against their inventory that they're using. I think all of that's been great, and it's needed to give some directional oversight into how markets are doing, where people are out and about, where people might still be, a little more hesitant, depending on, where their market is in the whole phased reopenings, where there's flare-ups and things like that. And I think what the mobility data overall really does is just give some directional context, and set people's minds a little bit at ease that, people are starting to come out more, and there is more traffic out in the marketplace and things like that. And I think those are some of the quantitative data points that we're using. I think when you drill down a little further and you look at the qualitative data points, I think Jill or Monica mentioned this before, but like when you look at phase reopenings, previously when you're looking at markets, right, everyone's kind of on a level playing field, right? There's always market nuances in terms of formats, environments, and things like that that are going to change from, an LA to a New York to a Houston. But now, you're taking it a step further and you're looking at additionally these other qualitative data points, which are phase reopening. So if this market has gyms that are still closed, but outdoor dining's open, not indoor dining, what restaurants have outdoor dining, what POIs should you be targeting? Normally it's easy to just target restaurants or target other industries, but when there's certain industries that are open, certain that are closed, but then also within that industry there's certain that are open and certain that are closed. There's a lot of qualitative data points that need to be taken into account as we plan to buy in this kind of global climate right now.
Any other data points or anything else that anybody's found important or helpful as they've spoken with clients? Or are there any certain bits of information that clients seem to be wanting to know that we haven't talked about yet that might be helpful?
I think for us, Justin pretty much covered it. Most are asking, or we're sharing the mobility stuff. We're sharing the variation, the stuff from GeoPath, the Apple data. It kind of varies, and we discuss it with the client to see, what makes the most sense for them, or how they want to see it, or how they want to agency wants to spin it a certain way to their client, and what helps them the most. We're just working with them to do that. And again, pulling from our media partners too, that are kind of doing it all a little bit different as well, saying, here's our options, this is how we can report upon it. How do you want to see it? We're all kind of telling a very similar story, because it's all coming back to, at some point, a data that everybody is using. So we're looking at it kind of as a trend base too, not like so individually, but like, hey, let's just see that trend increase more so, and just using that as one decision point within the full decision. It's just one factor that they're using.
It's a good point. Like, so is there anything that media operators listening in today that could provide that would be helpful for you all?
I think, outwardly for operators talking to us, I think there could seem to be certain categories, clients that haven't seemed to be adversely affected by COVID-19. And so, I know our team, we get this client would be great to be up right now because this is booming, right? But again, it gets kind of back to understanding the client strategy. Like, for example, we have a beer client on our roster. They don't typically use out of home to target home consumption. They use it to target bars, nightlife, restaurants, people out, beaches, right? So when those, even though beer sales or alcohol sales may be way up right now, and you would think it makes sense, but when the bars and the restaurants and the beaches are closed or changing it on a daily basis in any given market, it's not something that they're going to do for out of home, right? So I think there's just different issues at play. There's also, products where it seems like, and they are doing amazing business, but there's potential issues with their distribution, supply chain issues, right? So if they're doing great, but they can't get products in store, even if it's for home consumption, they're not going to further advertise it. And then honestly, on our side, there's just certain clients that are dealing with more pressing issues on their side right now. Like, we need to kind of know and understand, and I think we're all learning that a little bit, even through these kind of Zoom discussions with our clients. Some are more open to discussions, looking at things, tapping their toe back in, and others are like, we have more pressing things we're dealing with, and we on the agency side need to kind of decide when it's time to step back and when it's the appropriate time to bring something to those individual clients.
Yeah, I would agree with all those points.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, not all advertisers are prepared to dive back in, even if they're seeing that mobility increase. We have to think about, to Monica's point, how the situation has impacted their ability to do other things, whether it be, actually creating the creative. Photo shoots were completely canceled. Their ability to, edit even something they do have has kind of been stifled a little bit, or they just don't feel like the messaging they have on hand is relevant. So we're seeing advertisers being sensitive to each market situation, or what stage that they're in. I feel like the COVID messaging is starting to fade away a little bit for advertisers, but they're still being careful about how, when, and where they're speaking to their consumers. And in some cases, it feels like no message could be better than the wrong one. So again, even if they're seeing, like, we're showing the numbers and like, oh, they're increasing, get back out there, that doesn't mean they have something, ready, or that they're prepared to speak to their consumers yet. So I think, if there was something that we wanted to, talk about today, or just like communicate to media partners, is that now more than ever, think about relevant offerings, but on now an elevated level, or an extra layer added in there of considering the COVID impact on that specific industry.
Yeah, I think, fire sale offers are great, and we are used to getting them all the time. But I think, to Monica and Jill's points, like, there's got to be a little bit more of a layer of strategy now. I think you have to take into account, how businesses are operating, how the COVID's really affected them, what messaging, again, to Jill's point, is available, what really their business is looking like, and ask those questions, and get a little bit of that, get in the weeds a little bit, if you will, before, just proposing, it's kind of like we talked about, like, you're looking at the mobility data directionally, right? It's meant to look at directionally. It's not, getting into the nuances of every client and every phased reopening in a market, and the way, some of our clients are looking at out of home right now. And so you can see that a market's back, or that the mobility data is back, but that doesn't mean that every client just want to jump back in and advertise, because people are out and about. You have to get a little bit deeper than that. And I think that's, something for, some of the operators to ask us questions. Let us tell you what is going on a little bit deeper in the business, and not, just kind of blanket media opportunities that aren't digging a little bit deeper, if you will.
And I think Jill had a great point with creative. That's something that not everyone thinks about, but there's so much behind the scene going on. If the agencies can't come up with new creative, if they don't have the teams physically in the same space to be able to do that, or if they can't figure out what that right comment is right now, right? Not necessarily a COVID message, not a non-COVID. I think that does play a big factor in the decision-making moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that was really interesting for me to hear. Like, you're on the outside looking in, and you think, oh yeah, like, beer is doing great right now, but you don't think about, or at least maybe I didn't, like, supply chain disruptions, or to Jill's point, like, are people ready with creative to go out? They may be excited, but they may not be able to have had the creative shot, or the strategy conceptualized, like, from the creative side. So those are all really, really interesting points. And I like the point about, and I feel like this did come up last month too, about conversations, right? It's about asking questions. It's about the relationships, and being open to having those conversations with the media operators, your partners on that side. I think it's kind of a really good takeaway. And also too, I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A widget. We'll go to them in a little bit. I do have a couple more questions for the panel, but then also want to hear from others on the listening in today. And Joe, just talking about it, and I feel like we started getting to this as well in some of the previous discussion, but how would you say the past several months have evolved your relationships with clients? And there's the broader, like, business relationship, but how has this impacted your conversations with clients and even your media partners?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed a little bit. The virtual world is definitely different, and sometimes in a good way. I think you know you get a little deeper with clients when you go through something like this. When the world goes through something like this, it's affecting different clients both personally and from a business standpoint, and you start to learn a little bit more about that. And there are some clients who are very affected, who have been very affected by this, who marketing and advertising simply isn't on the top of their list right now, and they've got bigger problems to worry about. And you have to be respectful of that. And there's other advertisers who will invite you in a little bit more and establish that deeper connection, and let you know that while this is going on with my business, this is what's going on personally. Whether it's a Zoom call and you're talking more face to face, because it's typically just over the phone. It's the connections, I think, have gotten a little bit deeper, and they have to, because it's not a normal world right now. Things aren't normal, budgets aren't normal, timelines aren't normal. So I think there's places where you might feel a little bit more disconnected, but I think the overarching majority, you feel a little bit more connected with your clients, at least from my perspective right now.
I agree. I think that's actually been one of the positives coming out of this. I think we've all had to learn to adapt, change our way of thinking. But I think with our clients, again, to Justin's point, there's some who are just trying to keep their doors open, who just don't have time. But with a lot, doing the Zooms, doing the work from home, it's really made it a lot more personal and deeper conversations. When they're telling you, and they can't avoid kind of sharing, that they just got done homeschooling for an hour and a half, or like I said in the beginning, dogs barking in the background, it gives you more of that personal things that you're talking about, where prior to this, we might have just got on a conference call or even in a meeting around a big conference table and you got immediately to the agenda. This, I think, has really given us a little bit more human contact with our clients, kind of deepened some of the relationships, as it's had to get a little more personal. It's not, you see a little more under the hood.
Gotcha.
I like that phrase, Monica. That's a good one. For the most part, it has brought us closer together. I mean, to your point, it kind of like it's humanized us a little bit more. You get so caught up in the daily grind that you really do just kind of, if you get on the phone with somebody, you jump right into work. And if you ask, how are you? It seems more about like a small talk you're supposed to, and you move on right away. But now I feel like that simple "how are you" has taken on a whole new meaning. It's now not so much that simple question, and it's more just like, how are you feeling? Are you healthy? Is your family healthy? Or yeah, how did distance learning go for you today? Or I mean, and lately it's like, what is your school district saying about going back to school? And so it kind of feels good to have more people to even like have those conversations with, even before you go into the work conversation. And again, it might take longer, like you said, you're having like longer meetings or something like that, but it's impossible to avoid. And it just, again, it's humanized it. Your conversations are kind of more meaningful because you feel like you're in it together and it feels supportive, before you go into the work conversation, which has, to me, felt like it's only improved the relationships, whether it's with the client or an operator or your own team and colleagues.
Right. Are there any learnings from this that, do you think this is just because of the moment? Do you think any of these, you'll take anything away from these kind of experiences kind of into how you work in the future, or, kind of anything you might feel like you might do differently?
Yeah, I think we all get caught up a little bit in the business, and we have previously, before COVID. Everyone's always just, everyone knows they're crazed with work, and everyone's running around doing a million different things, having meetings, calls, everything like that. And I think what COVID's done for some of us, and it's through, some of these client relationships and deeper connections that we've made is just a greater level of empathy for people and their situations and their employment situations, their company situations, their personal situations. I think it's just given that a little bit more empathy to people, and I think that's what's brought us a little bit closer.
Yeah, I think personally, I'm going to keep a lot of virtual meetings. Like, part of me says, why didn't we do this more often before? I manage a remote team, and we always would just get on the call on a weekly basis, just on the phone. And we never did a video chat until we were working at home. I'm like, I don't know what just changed this, but all of a sudden it feels like this is what we should be doing. And I don't really know why I wasn't doing that before. So sorry, team, we're going to keep doing it when we do return to the office. But same for all meetings, because I have a feeling that even when we return to the office, not everybody's going to start jumping on planes and being able to visit and make in-person meetings, so, it's nice to still see each other and talk to each other and meet. And there's kind of just no reason not to do that like this moving forward until, companies or people feel comfortable traveling again and companies are able to travel again.
Right. Yeah, it does kind of close the distance, right? Being able to see people. I know, not to give too much of my own experience, but I used to work for an agency where we were based in New York and San Francisco, and we had the same experience, but then we got video conferencing, and we called it kind of closing the long hallway, right? But yeah, it's amazing how it does bring people closer together that quickly. I do want to go to a question that some of the questions that have been coming up. This one's it's interesting, really specific about kind of media. And if you've seen any kind of adjustments or changes. So I'm just going to read it. So how are the Midtown or city center out-of-home products competing with more kind of hyper-local products just outside the main market centers now that traffic patterns have changed? So do you see any, and maybe the bigger thing is like, are you seeing any differences or as the traffic patterns change and kind of the inventory you're looking at or considering, or clients may be interested in?
I mean, and from my opinion, I think it's really more client based and what their strategic goals are and objectives. Because while I think we look at all the traffic numbers and we look that there's probably a lot more highway traffic, but that still doesn't mean that highway billboards or just roadside in general makes sense for a particular client. It might not make sense for them to do outdoor if that's really the key touch point that's coming back right now. But you have to look at that, and you look at it strategically as well, because yes, while there isn't as much traffic in city centers, there still is traffic. And you take New York, for example, and there's outdoor seating everywhere, and people are out and about, maybe not, riding the subway or, doing the normal commute, but there's people out and about, they're going shopping, they're going to restaurants, they're eating. So some of that targeted digital in city center, in Manhattan, in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, is still super relevant based on the client objectives and who they're trying to reach and what their initiatives are. So I think, we look at all the different types of data and we use it to the best of our ability, paired with objectives and strategy from our clients, to make the most effective decisions. I think that's, from my perspective.
I think a couple months ago, honestly, maybe more so. Like, I think a couple months ago, clients were maybe going, maybe New York and LA aren't the place for me to be right now, but maybe I'll look at our tier 2 markets that aren't so impacted. I think that's pulling back a little bit now. I'm not sure the COVID situation is dictating the market as much as it is the media format. I mean, again, to Justin's point, they might be a little more hesitant to jump back into transit products, looking more at traditional or large format. Maybe they're looking at, to your point, not being as dense in the city center and spreading their buy over, boroughs. But I think really for us, it was a little bit more of that a couple months ago than it is now. Now I think it's just a little bit more cautious optimism, as we keep saying, and knowing what flexibility they'll have if something changes.
I would agree with that.
Gotcha. Okay. And again, as you all, if there's other questions, please, please, please feel free to post them. And, Justin, you did mention something about the client being interested in, wanting to see breadth of data. And I know, you mentioned the geopath mobility data and things like that. Do you feel like that people are more universally using that data, or is there like a mix of data? And what helps you choose with what data to use? And do you think we all should be using the not to push it the one data source or things like that?
Yeah, I think, I think GeoPath is the baseline, and I think that's what most people use as their first kind of level of data, if you will, to use the variation dashboard to see how markets are performing, on a more broader level, and where that mobility is and where it's coming back, across CBSAs, across on the format level. I think at this point, though, we're also trying to get as many different data sets and data points as we possibly can to inform our decision making, because like we talked about, clients' budgets are tighter, their timelines are tighter, everything is much more targeted, and being looked at under a magnifying glass. So we're open to looking at every possible data set that can help inform our decision making, whether that's Apple data, whether that's Google data, whether that's GeoPath, whether it's SafeGraph. There's so many different data sources out there, and I think for us to only look at one would be not doing our clients justice, and not taking in all the knowledge that we possibly could. So I think that GeoPath does a great job, giving that broad level of data, and we definitely use that. But I think we've got to look other places as well to get as much as we can.
Right. Well, and especially when we're in a situation where we're looking at partners or formats that are not GeoPath audited, we have to go out to those other, and that's where I'm leaning more towards the Apple data, or just other information like local information. We're reaching out to our partners to say, sometimes anecdotally, like it's not bad to just hear like, what are you guys seeing in the marketplace, or if we're talking about some transit, like tell us what the schedules are like. Are you on 50%? Are you just running your weekend stuff? Like sometimes just having the number isn't enough. We need to kind of like, more get more descriptive in what the situation actually is, because we're not there, our agency partners not there, the advertisers not there. We need to know kind of what's actually happening. So just talking to someone locally in the market, we're starting to add some of that on top of the hard data, just to provide, like Justin said, just the more information we have, the better to kind of paint the full picture of what's happening in that particular market.
Yeah, and it goes back to kind of earlier part of the conversation, like, it's this qualitative, quantitative.
Exactly.
There's some anecdotal, there's some judgment, local market knowledge is important. So cool. So another question came in, and this is about just out of home products again. Are you seeing anything related to static versus digital right now from clients? Like, do they have a preference in terms of the flexibility for digital versus static, or are you not seeing any preference there?
Again, I think it varies a little bit by client, but we're definitely seeing a bigger push to digital, because there is just more flexibility from a creative standpoint, and more flexibility from a timing standpoint. I mean, again, every client's different. It's going to vary based on the product, but ours would be an increase on the digital side.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, just with people trying to get into market, and again, to, Jill Monica's point about flexibility and what we've talked about before, like it just is easier. It makes sense. It's more targeted. It's quicker to market. So I think digital is being prioritized more so than ever. I think we started to see a little bit of that shift before COVID, and then, since COVID, I think it's been even more so. That doesn't mean static's going to be replaced. It's always going to be something clients want, but right now in the circumstances we're in the next 4 weeks to 6 weeks to 12 weeks, I think digital is definitely being prioritized.
And I think with those shorter lead times, right? We're trying to plan everything shorter. So I think that's impacted it as well from a digital stand.
Yeah.
Are there, sorry, one more question coming in and just looking at it. Do you think, how do you think programmatic out of home is going to be going to impact business? Do you see any impact there? Or any thoughts on that? Given COVID, I guess, where we are, like, is that tough one to answer at this point, or?
Yeah, I don't think COVID's pushing programmatic forward, in my opinion. I think, it was something that we've been talking about for a while in out of home, and I think it's, it can be effective for some clients, and some more and more clients are starting to test it. But I personally don't see COVID necessarily pushing the needle on programmatic out of home any more so than it was already starting to gain some traction and starting to kind of pique the interest a little bit more, amongst agencies and clients and brands and operators and everything. But I don't think COVID's pushed the needle on that necessarily.
I'd agree.
It might even be too soon to say that. Like maybe early next year, we'll see if there was like a trickle down or an impact at this point. But I would agree, just like the momentum, it was, I don't think that it's picking up because of that. I think we're already looking at it for some advertisers where it makes sense to do it, because like just because you can doesn't mean you do. So it just kind of more advertiser by advertiser what makes sense versus COVID being an impact on it.
Gotcha. Cool. I want to, with the kind of remaining time, just talk a little bit more about the future and just get your sense of, any predictions that you have for the future in terms of out of home. I know kind of maybe even started to talk about that a little bit in terms of, do you think are you seeing any emerging categories that you think will kind of that have come out of COVID that you think might be advertising more in the future or working differently? Or, do you think clients will ultimately plan differently? We've got this shortened window. It sounds like, people are planning, for the middle of August and we're in the middle of July. Like, do you think those kinds of things will be forever? Or do you think it's maybe kind of the moment? I know I asked a bunch of different questions in that.
Yeah.
So I'll just kind of answer whatever you want, and I'll kind of probe for other things. So,
since you prompted it, I'll say, unfortunately, I do think that the timing of things and planning much more quickly and getting into market more quickly is probably going to be something that continues to happen. I feel like even year after year, it seems to be, picking up, and there's this, sense of just needing everything immediately, or, wanting to react to a lot of situations, not just reacting to COVID. But there's so much to react to nowadays that advertisers are going to want that flexibility and to be able to do that, and are going to expect us to get into market more quickly. So unfortunately, just for our own sake and sanity, I think that those planning timelines will continue to remain pretty tight moving forward.
Yeah, I think there were, before COVID, planning timelines were starting to shrink, and this is just quickened that. So I don't see them expanding back again, after COVID. I think they're going to get tighter, and we've seen them get tighter, and I think they're going to stay that way. And I think that, like all that goes back into, I think, what we saw before COVID was, timelines were tightening anyway, and digital was becoming, more prolific and a little more emphasized. And I think COVID's definitely speeded that stuff up. The timelines are tightened, digital's becoming even more of a focus, and I don't see that, changing afterwards. I think that's just going to be the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, probably I would have guessed that everyone listening on this call has the same hope that as things begin to reopen, everyone wants to leave their home. No one wants to be inside. And that as an industry overall, we're going to see a significant rebound and growth, right? I think only time will tell if some clients permanently think and plan differently as a result of this. I agree with Justin and Jill. I don't know if our timelines are ever gonna be back to what they were 6 months ago, let alone what they were a year ago. I mean, those were speeding up anyway over the last many years. I think some, by the nature of their business, will plan further in advance. They'll need to for fall launches or studios. Others are going to consistently be shorter and shorter lead times. And I think some things in how clients change how they plan, again, time's going to tell. We never would have thought we would be having some of the discussions we're having now 6 or 7 months ago. So I think there's a lot that maybe we're going to learn after this, and maybe after they're looking at some of their own internal first-party data post-COVID.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Have you, I know this was one of the, questions in the litany of questions I just asked, but have you been surprised by any categories that you're seeing, or any kind of clients that maybe you're seeing advertised that maybe hadn't in the past, or anything like that? Has there been anything surprising for you all, or interesting?
Not super surprising. I think, a lot of the emerging categories and things like that, like I think we're like D2C, a lot of D2C. I think D2C was big before this. I think it's, continued to be big. I've also seen a lot of advertisers who have been, who haven't been as affected by COVID, doubling down on a lot of their media spend, and whether that's, a Netflix and Amazon, a Unilever, a P&G. I've seen them increasing spend. But I'm not seeing any new category other than maybe like a Zoom or or all these chat companies now that are coming out and advertising, because that's all we do. But that's just my perspective.
Gotcha. Cool. Any other thoughts on the future? And before we go back to, there's maybe one or two other questions from the audience that we want to ask. I know we've started to talk about how we're working differently using Zoom and more video conferencing. Anything how you think you might work differently with your media partners in the future that might be different in any way? Not to put you all on the spot.
I think a lot like our client partners. I think some of this has increased those connections too, humanize those relationships. We've kind of all felt a part of the same, team, that we're all struggling under some of the same constraints. And I think we're talking differently. It's a lot of the same thing that we're saying with the client relationships. Mm-hmm. And sometimes instead of the 3 minutes, do you have this and is it available and can you send me the email? There are 10, 15-minute conversations, and we're actually spending a little bit more time, taking some time to talk to each other and find out how we're doing more. So I think it's humanized those just as much as it has the client relationships.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Sharing more information too. Like it feels like we're able, like people are more willing to provide more reasoning, and just like when we're talking to our clients, they'll be really open about like, hey, we can't do this opportunity because of X, and everybody just kind of feels like a little bit more like obligated almost to like, provide more rationale and why we're not doing something. And here's our situation. Like when we were talking before, everybody's, in a different situation. You kind of have to think of the state of their particular industry or what other priorities they have in terms of, they're just trying to stay solvent or something like that. Like we're seeing our clients kind of like share a lot of that and be like, well, we're all just focused on this over here. And we're almost getting like more rationale for not moving forward with something than we ever have before. So I feel like that's helping in our relationships too. And we're just being open and honest about it and going the extra mile to help explain why we're not doing something. because everybody's so anxious to get back in there, and we all want, like, you know, the RFPs to come in and this and that it's hard. So I feel like we're all kind of working a little bit harder for each other to explain what situation we're all in. And I feel like that's kind of improving the lines of communication between us and our client partners, and then us and our media partners.
Yeah, and go ahead. Yeah, and something that, you know, I've tried to take time to do, and you know, in not having to run around and be in meetings and run to the office and get home and all these things is, you know, I've tried to take a little more time to take calls from operators and you know, just chat with them and new opportunities and things like that, and people that reach out, and just being able to do that all quickly, virtually, you know, quick 10-15 minutes, learn about a new opportunity, speak with a media operator who, you know, you might not know. I think, you know, I've been trying to take some of that time, and I think, you know, going through this process has helped do that, where, you know, in the past I might not have had, you know, the time to schedule a phone call or to get to a meeting or have, you know, someone in the office. But when you're doing it virtually, you can quick jump on a Zoom and check out the opportunity and give them a little feedback, give them a you know, a little understanding about what your clients are doing. You know, it's just made timing a little bit more flexible. So it's, you know, I think it's, you know, to Jill's point, I think the communication is improving across client, agency, and media operator.
Cool. Just have a couple of kind of fun questions, I think, to end this on from the audience. So, you know, I asked you, you know, is there any surprise category? But this interesting take on is, like, are there any favorites from you all of changes in clients' messaging during the, you know, kind of in response to what's been going on, or anything that you found really interesting, or like, yeah, that was really clever or right on point that kind of spoke to you? And I'll give you a moment to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some interesting COVID messaging. You know, whether it's messaging about washing your hands or social distancing or whatever it is. I think, you know, we've seen some. I've seen some pretty clever creative around the topic. You know, outside of just get tested or whatever it might be. That's been interesting. I think, you know, brands are also looking to use out of home a little differently with their messaging. You know, whether it's a store, you know, a retailer who usually has a ton of storefronts and they use their storefronts for signage, using the out of home as signage. So they're looking at, you know, placements around certain markets or certain cities to almost use as that normal branding message that they have, you know, with their storefronts. Those are kind of the two that come to top of mind.
I'd say any campaign that was doing thank you messages to frontline workers too. I mean, they weren't really like fun or, you know, unique necessarily, but it kind of just felt like everybody came together and said, we need to do this. Let's pull down X creative. And it would be creative that was still like relevant too, you know, and they still just decided to just change messaging because they felt like it was just for like the good of the community to do that, you know, and focused it more on just like, thank you to the frontline workers. And again, it was in the scenario I'm thinking, I mean, whatever message was up there was still okay to run. It wasn't insensitive. They just, you know, decided themselves that this isn't important right now. You know, recruitment is not a big deal. We just need to say thank you and appreciation to our community at this point. I liked those ones.
Great, cool.
I agree.
Yeah, was there anything for you, Monica, or just?
Say, so this isn't a shameless plug for Delta. But really not, because it was just a public service thing. We had some super awesome support though from some of our media partners. We had a client at an agency we work with that unfortunately tragically lost her son, and she created this awesome movement for hashtag good deeds for Blake. And it's a site you go to and you do a good deed and you basically pay it forward, right? And you share and we learned about all of this kind of during this COVID crisis, and we had a lot of great media support. There was some open inventory out there, and people put this messaging up for us on digital signage. And I think it was just a really warm, it just made you feel good in a time when there wasn't a lot of feel good out there. So that's one of my favorite lately.
Cool. And thank you for that. And just last question, kind of ending on a high note. When you're talking with clients these days, what are you telling them about out of home and why it's unique and kind of a great media during COVID-19? Are there any key things you're telling them to be like, yes, out of home is awesome?
For me, I think, everyone's been stuck inside so much, watching so much TV, and it all just blends together. And there's so much Netflix and Amazon and everything that I think people, we always talk about how people are in a different mindset when they're out of the home. I think people are even more so in a different mindset when they're out of the home in COVID, because it's like you're free for like that 5 minutes, half an hour. You're really just like out of your house. You get a little bit of that adrenaline. You get the fresh air. So I think it's while like the traffic numbers might be down and there's certain things like, transit that might not be popular right now and not have a ton of traffic, but the places where you can still reach an audience with out of home, I think consumers are really in that mindset to absorb the content in a different way than they've been used to, stuck in their houses for the past, 4, 5, 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So true. I mean, at the end of the day, we are all just consumers ourselves, right? We want nothing more than to get back out there and get outside of our houses. So, we're all kind of only half joking about like, just wait, when people can, they're going to go out in droves, and they're going to stay out there. And even if they are now, they're just doing it very safely. And it's still that one format that really gets people talking and really creates a buzz. And it's, the only, format where people are taking pictures of it and posting and constantly talking about it, so like none of that has changed. That is still the case and will always be the case. So we just need to, continue to, provide them with the information they need to feel comfortable to move forward, and remind them of all the reasons that they had used it in the past. And it wasn't just because, of the eyeballs on it. There's so much more to the out of home space than just that traffic figure.
Mm-hmm. Right. Anything for you, Monica?
I think, they pretty much covered it all. I think that same attributes that were great pre-COVID are still there. I think we're all waiting for those floodgates to kind of open. And I think Justin had a great point. I think people are going to be open to the message in a different way than they were pre. People are like us. Everyone wants to get out. I think people are really going to be more open to consuming that out-of-home message differently. I think it's going to be a very positive thing. I think we'd all like it to be sooner than later.
Great. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you all being a part of the panel and answering all of my questions and all the questions from the audience today, and just want to say thank you, and we really appreciate it, and hope that everybody found this session valuable. And just so you all know, it's going to be posted. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel as well as the homepage of our website, or if you want to go back and watch anything. And just want to say thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great
Thanks.
Friday, everyone.
Take care. Stay safe.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Happy Friday.